Hello and welcome to the Grueling Truth Radio Network and the Best Available Draft Podcast. I am your host, Matt Minich. With me today, I've got a very special guest, Emory Hunt. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, great. So Emory has been down at the Shrine game this week, checking out the practices and the game. So he is on to talk about that whole process. For some of us that weren't there, didn't have that access to see some of the things that we couldn't see on TV. Emory, what else are you working on, and where can people find and follow your work?
Well, they can follow me on Twitter at FBallGamePlan, and they can also subscribe to the Football Game Plan Network located at youtube.com/footballgameplan. That's where you can find all of the practice highlights and prospect interviews and our upcoming NFL draft content, where we break down over 600 or so players in preparation for the 2019 NFL draft. So you can find all that on our YouTube channel, and we have it all backlogged on our website at footballgameplan.com. Not necessarily backlogged, but cataloged, at footballgameplan.com. So FBallGamePlan on Twitter, footballgameplan.com, and youtube.com/footballgameplan.
All right, awesome. Yeah, definitely check that out. I know, definitely great follow on Twitter. I'm always finding good stuff from you on there, so I definitely recommend. So I know the big thing that we've been hearing about basically since last year's draft ended is what a weak quarterback class this is. And personally, I hate that terminology. It drives me crazy because nobody's drafting a class of quarterbacks. It's about finding the one guy out there. The one guy that can be your guy's good turn around the program, and maybe not even a first round guy like we've seen with Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson in recent years, being some mid round guys that have definitely come in and made a huge impact. What did you think of the quarterbacks you saw down there this week?
I kind of echo what you say. I think every class has talent in it. You just have to do sometimes a deeper job of finding that talent. And so far this week, what I was able to see was a guy in Taylor Cornelius from Oklahoma State, probably had the strongest arm and was the most consistent guy throughout the week. I know he threw 2 interceptions in the game, but throughout the week of practices, he was most consistent. Easton Stick had a lot of fanfare, as well as Brett Rippon, and both guys, to me, kind of, came in and had up and down days. Some days they looked sharp. Some days they were inconsistent. Sometimes they may have performed well, whether it was one-on-one drills or even a team or 7-on-7. So it was a mixed bag for those guys. And I thought Marcus McMaryion from Fresno State was another one that had a really good day. And Ole Miss's Jordan Tiamo closed out the week with a strong 2 days of practice.
Yeah, I think watching the game, I thought Tiamo was the one that impressed me the most. I thought he hit some real nice touch on his deep balls and was able to zip in some slants pretty nicely too. McMaryion was one who really surprised me because I hadn't seen or heard too much about him yet. Kind of pretty early in the process for me of evaluating tape and hadn't gotten to him yet. And then he definitely stuck out. Yeah, I think when you look at Easton Stick and Brett Rippon, a lot of experience for those guys. A lot of starting experience. Stick took over for Wentz, but he actually played quite a bit when Wentz was in college and missed several games during one of their championship runs a few years ago. So I think that's something that you look at the top guys that are getting a lot of talk in this class. From Kyler Murray, Dwayne Haskins, you're not seeing a ton of game experience. And I know that some NFL evaluators are real big on that. I know, Mike Lombardi talks in his book about Bill Parcells wanted quarterbacks to have 23 wins, or he didn't want to draft them. So seeing some guys with some experience that could be some guys they'll stick out a little bit. So definitely, good to see those guys that have the experience getting a little bit of exposure in there too.
Yeah, it's important, man. Sometimes you want guys with a lot of experience. They've seen a lot of things, a lot of defenses. They've seen a lot of situations, and you like guys that have also had that championship pedigree, and that's Easton Stick. He's played a lot of big games. When you play at North Dakota State, you're everybody's championship game, and so you have to really be on. He's also been a part of some big-time upsets, too. They upset Iowa when Iowa was ranked top 15 in the country, and so he's won 2 championships by himself and helped lead them to a third when he had to fill in for Carson Wentz, like you mentioned. So, yeah, sometimes you want the guys that have experience because they've seen a lot, they've done a lot, and it gives you a little bit more calm of what to expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of times it's kind of counterintuitive, but I think that quarterbacks are actually the level where a position where being down a level at the FCS level, I think it's a little bit less important for them than other positions because it's not like you're going, you got to run stride for stride with the fastest receiver in the league. It's not like you got to be able to handle the strongest defensive lineman in the country. Really, the speed difference in the game at that level, it's balanced out because your guys are a little slower, but their guys are also a little slower on defense. And from a coaching standpoint, you see a lot of carryover, a lot of crossover, and a lot of the guys at that FCS level are people that were graduate assistants, were position coaches at BCS schools. So they see some complex defenses and complex offenses. So from a mental standpoint, I really don't think there's a big difference, and I think that's why you've seen guys like Garoppolo and Wentz come in and be able to handle it so well, because I really think that it's perfectly fine for a quarterback to come from that level. I think there's less questions than there are when you look at the athletic and strength comparisons at other positions. But kind of speaking on that, there were a couple of handful of smaller school guys in addition to Easton Stick in the game, in the Shrine game. One that stuck out to me was Uda, the tackle from Elon. I hope I'm not butchering his name there. I tried to spell it phonetically, but I thought he looked real good. And I know there's a lot of talk about Simpkins from Sioux Falls as well. Any small school guys that stuck out to you in addition to Stick?
Well, you talked about him. You looked at Ali Udo, the guy from Eli you talked about, and as well as Ethan Greenwich from Villanova, and also the other lineman, like you said, Trey Pipkins from Sioux Falls. Those guys were impressive all week along the offensive line. That's another position where you kind of wonder what it's going to look like from the FCS level to the FBS level, the Power 5 level, and those guys were able to acclimate themselves well. Pipkins is a Division II kid that stepped up in weight class. And you also look at on the defensive side, B.J. Blunt from McNeese State, who plays – he's listed as a linebacker, but he plays safety at McNeese, moves to linebacker at McNeese. And, he's 6'1", 6 feet, about 200 pounds. So he's going to be more of along the lines of that hybrid safety nickel linebacker type of a player who had a really good day today in the game. And Marcus Jones from Angelo State, another guy that impressed in the game as well as throughout the week's practice. So it's a really good week for these small school guys from the FCS, D2, NAIA levels. And that's what you want to see. Can they step up in weight class and be the same player that made you go wow when you watch them on tape?
Yeah, absolutely. And, just watching the live game action, it definitely seemed like all those guys belong. So I think that's really a big part of it. So looking at that and kind of moving forward, that defensive player of the game was Justin Hollins from Oregon. Kind of an edge player, real tall, long guy. One thing it was a little hard to see in the game about his flexibility, and that's kind of something with big, tall guys like that you kind of worry about. Looked like a guy was great holding edge and can do a little bit on the inside pass rush. But I wonder about him getting down and bending on those edges. Is that anything you saw in practice this week that give us a little light on that?
What was interesting to me, he looked to me like he had a week similar to Uchenna Nwosu of the Chargers. And he was just real stout at the point of attack, like you mentioned, a really good run defender. And he talked about this when I spoke with him, how people undervalue his ability to stop the run. And the pass rush thing is it's just like stopping run. A lot of times you got to have the want to get to the quarterback, and I think that's an area he can grow in. I was even asked during the game by someone that was covering the game, what position do you think he could play, linebacker or D? And I was like, well, he's kind of working at linebacker, and with his hand off the ground. Why not just let him stay there and continue to have him add weight, add more strength, and be a guy that can excel in a 2-point stance as opposed to a 3-point stance. So, I'm pretty sure in situations they'll use him as that guy, as a defensive end, and let him just fly off the edge and pass rush. But I'm just so impressed with his run defense, and he won defensive MVP of the game because he's so stout as far as finding the football, good against the run, had 2 sacks, 2 TFLs. He was a really good player throughout the week and also in the game.
Yeah, and there's definitely they call the position edge nowadays, and yet we still kind of lose that holding the edge is such a big part of it. It's not all about the pass rush, and he's definitely a guy that excelled in that game in both those areas, and really seems to have the makings of a guy that can do that at the next level. Now, staying on the D line, a couple other guys that looked pretty impressive. Daniel Wise from Kansas, whose brother came out a couple years ago, and Jordan Brailford from Oklahoma State had a pretty impressive game as well. What did you think about those 2 guys?
Oh, they were awesome, man. Wise seemed to be unblockable in one-on-ones and also in 9-on-7 periods. I thought he did a fantastic job just disengaging and getting to the backfield and finding the football. A lot of times you find guys that are quick off the ball, have great ball, get off, and they get in the backfield and they don't know where the hell the ball is. And so for him to really use technique to disengage, to get off blocks, to get off the ball like he did, and to also find the football was impressive. And he was a guy that you saw in one-on-ones, in 9-on-7, and the team run period where he just sort of flashed constantly and was making plays.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Those guys definitely stood out, turned some heads of scouts, I'm sure, all week. Another guy that I noticed was Ulysses Gilbert, the Akron linebacker. Was making some good plays in the run game, almost had a pick 6, but real great anticipation there and reading out the screen, and almost managed to pull that in. What we're seeing on him during the week?
It's funny you bring it up because that was another guy that quietly had a really good week. He's assignment sound, man, and you saw him during the week of practice in team periods where he was diagnosing where the run was going to go, outside run, so he was able to fly there, beat the running back to the spot. And as far as the passing game is concerned, you saw that in the game today. Like you said, he nearly had a pick 6 where he got in between the receiver, the ball, and the quarterback, jumped in that passing window and nearly picked it off. So I think for him, this is a really good week of work. You also got to give credit to Chris Nelson out of Texas, who has probably the best hand usage here. He was a defensive tackle that was just like Wise throughout the week and making things happen on the inside.
Oh, that's awesome. So, you pointed out another guy there. I think one of the things that's toughest to see on TV, they love showing the tight angles and getting you in there to the ball, and you don't always get to see what's going on in the defensive backfield. Who stood out to you at defensive back this week?
This week, I like Blaze Brown from Troy. He was one that was fluid in his transition, able to stay hip to hip with the receiver for the most part, made a couple of plays on the ball in 1-on-1 and also in 7-on-7. So I thought he had a really good week out there in the secondary. And also Tim Harris from Virginia, who got there late, but really stepped up and played well in the time he was there, well enough to where he earned a start in the game today. So shout out to those 2 guys for really playing with length, playing the ball, making sure no one makes plays on it. And also Jimmy Moreland out of James Madison. Every time you look up, you swear he played offense because every time you look up, he had the ball in his hand. So, he's a guy at the near kick 6 before half. And, that's the type of playmaker you want on your team, a guy that's always run the ball, that always has the ball in his hands. And that's not something that just happened this week. You go back and watch him at James Madison, he always turned the ball over. And that was a really good secondary with him. Raven Green, who's now with the Green Bay Packers, who played some this year and as an undrafted free agent. So they got some dudes back there that can make some plays, and Moreland was a big-time playmaker this week.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And seeing those guys are going to step up in this big moment, and show that they can step up in big moments at the NFL level. Another guy I noticed was Holman from Toledo. Like I said, you kind of limited what you can see in the defensive backfield on TV, but look pretty good in coverage on a couple of deep balls he saw. And I also saw him coming up and making some tackles, which the value of a corner making tackles is somewhat understated in the NFL. I think there's probably some teams that don't care about it too much, but it is it is an important factor for most teams, especially in the zone systems where they got to come up and be able to make a tackle. So yeah, that was definitely another one that stood out to me there. Moving over, we already talked about the quarterbacks on offense. Offensive skill players, who stood out to you there?
Terry Godwin and Keyshawn Johnson. I thought those two were the best receivers all week long. And Keyshawn Johnson from Fresno State, Terry Godwin from Georgia, who ended up winning the MVP in the game today. And when you look at Terry Godwin, everything he did was fast. From his, explosion off the ball, stemming his route, breaking out of his cuts, whether it was on a comeback or going, to the post or further going downfield or breaking it on an end route. He was explosive in every direction. Caught the ball extremely well. I think he may have had one drop all week, and it was a real tough catch. So Godwin definitely made himself some money, and I think when you look at Keyshawn Johnson, he was the Terry Godwin of the West squad, and he had really good chemistry, obviously, with Marcus McMaryion, but it felt like he had great chemistry with every other quarterback because he was the one that was consistently finding himself open in 7-on-7 and team period and in one-on-ones. You could throw it anywhere in his direction. He was going to come up with the catch. So I thought those two guys are really impressed this week. And I was just overall impressed with the length and athleticism of the West wide receivers. Everybody was at least 6'3", about 215, and can run. So that was impressive to see. So you had big guys playing in the slot, which was a matchup problem. And you had that on the East team with Jesper Horsted, the Princeton receiver, who was impressive in how he was able to stack a defensive back, catch the ball over his shoulders. He's probably good, I would say. He was more effective in 7-on-7 and team drill because they had him moved around. He constantly found soft spots in the zone and was able to shut it down and make the reception. So he was a guy that found a way to get open, but also has really good receiving skills and tracking the ball, which is clear evidence of how valuable he was as a baseball player back at Princeton as well.
Yeah, and that's an interesting parallel, though. I think a lot of times you see those guys that have played some other sports. Those skills could really transfer to you, and we see right now with Mahomes, the baseball skills, the way he's running around, throwing balls like a shortstop. All the different body movements that are involved in those things, and yeah, definitely from a skill player, a skill position, getting out there, catching balls, having to adjust on the fly, that's putting you into a lot of body positions as well, like you're seeing in baseball. So, yeah, Godwin, it really, to me, it seemed like he just took over the game at one point. It was just like, you get to that moment sometimes where it's like, okay, well, this guy's the best player, so let's just feed him the ball. It definitely seemed to be going that way. But yeah, he and Tarver from Utah State were a couple guys that stuck out to me as receivers. Tarver, like you said, another one of those bigger guys. But definitely a really good group of skill players, especially at the receiver position. So I agree with you 100% on that one, and definitely saw that carry over from practice into the game. So. Is there anybody else, anybody we might have missed that you want to come back to or mention that stood out to you think might have turned some heads this week?
Yeah, keep an eye on Jamal Custis, the Syracuse receiver, a 6'5", 213-pound guy that can play inside really well, can also thrive on the outside, but I think he surprised people this week with how fast he is for a big guy, because people expect him to be a lumbering target going downfield, but he was explosive, and he was able to create separation consistently against defensive backs, and he has huge hands and was able to catch everything thrown his way. I think he wears a 4X glove. So those big mitts in conjunction with how he was running routes from the slot, also, as an X or as a Z, he was very effective and impressive this week, and I wouldn't be surprised if he pushed himself into the conversation of probably getting the combine invite.
Yeah, I definitely thought he was a guy that had a couple of nice catches. He had one on a slant where he should have been tackled immediately, and he just shook the guy off like it was nothing and kept running. And definitely good to see that. And with all the obviously slants and drags and crosses have been big in the NFL for quite some time, but especially with all the RPOs and everything people are running, great to see that guy that can get in there, make the catch, take the hit, and shake it off and rack it a little bit, pick up some extra yards. So, that's definitely a great one to mention there, and a guy that I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about. So, all right, well, I appreciate you being my guest today. So we will have more draft coverage right up until the draft here on the Grueling Truth Radio Network. We'll be doing our live show once again on the first night of the draft as well. Next week, I'll be right back here, and I'll have John Sheeran and Joe Goodberry coming on, Sheeran from SB Nation and Goodberry from The Athletic. They're going to be down for the Senior Bowl. We'll be talking a little bit, just like we did today, about that whole process and who was sticking out in that game as well. So once again, thanks for joining me. Thank you to my guest, Emory Hunt. And we will be back next week on the Grueling Truth Radio Network with the best available draft podcast.